Today is June 20th, 2023, and this is the City of Iowa City Special Executive Session. And so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Alter.
Yes.
Burgess.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Harmson.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Teague.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Well, welcome, everyone. Item number 2 is litigation. Could I get a motion to approve executive session to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to produce prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation? Could I get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved. Taylor. Second. Alter.
We will go into executive session and return when we...
We need to vote to go into.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh.
Roll call, please.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We're going to go into executive session and return out here once we are done. So we're just returning from executive session on June 20th, 2023. And item number 3 is, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Done.
Second, Thomas.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. And we're going to go on. So today is Tuesday, June 20th, 2023, and this is the City of Iowa City's work session. The first item on our agenda is review urban chicken regulations. And I know that this was one that Councilor Dunn submitted, but we also had some staff correspondence. So whoever wants to just jump in.
Staff can go first.
I'll yield to you.
I'll go to me. Okay, sure. So this item has particularly come up a couple times over the past couple years, as I understand, but came to my attention more recently through a couple of conversations that I had. One particular email that we all received from a resident named Jason Agnew about a little book report, or not really a book report, a little letter to the community, a letter to the city council advocating for us to unban roosters. So this is part of me making good on a promise to try. At the same time, I was also in a conversation with a few residents at Prairie Hill, and I am aware of other residents at other, co-housing, co-op organizations in the community that want to have legal roosters, want to go through, not roosters, chickens, and want to go through the legal process to do it, but because of our ban on urban chickens in multifamily residential homes, they are prohibited from doing so. So this started with a few ideas that I sent off to staff, a couple different proposals, one looking at the possibility of allowing roosters in the community to be discussed and decided by council, as well as some others discussing the ability for us to make specific qualifications that would allow people in multifamily residential homes to have access to urban chickens should they want as well. Yeah, that's the broad thing there. I would say that one thing that was not addressed, I guess, by the staff report in brief on this is the question of whether or not we would like to continue requiring neighbor consent in these matters, or whether it will be neighbor notification, just so that people are aware. And that is an active conversation that I've had with a number of members of council, whether or not we have the specific consent or the notification. So from there, I think that we just go into discussion, I would presume, and, yeah. I would say, I guess, from there, I do support the report from staff. Pretty much in every part, except for raising the particular fees, and then I would further advocate for neighbor notice rather than consent within the direct neighbor area.
Well, I'd like to thank Councilor Dunn for pursuing this. This has been an issue that I've certainly heard from residents in Iowa City asking that we revise the ordinance due to a variety of reasons, and I think we can cover them all now. I'll just the issues and questions for council consideration, the way it's laid out in the memo. I would say I certainly do not think roosters are a good idea, and I'm speaking just for the sake of full transparency here. I'm one of the 30 people who have a chicken permit. I didn't realize there were only 30 of us, but anyway, so I'm one of them. It's not an abstraction to me. We've had them for years. I can kind of speak to what the experience is in terms of, many of the issues that we're discussing here. I also support the allowing them on multifamily buildings. I agree that staff should be granted discretion with respect to a few site requirements, increasing the number of hens to 6. I do not support the idea of increasing the fee, and I did look at some other cities in their practices on this. Cedar Rapids, it's an annual fee and it's $25 a year. One suggestion I would have is that we actually reduce the initial fee from $100 to $75, and then so basically it's a $25 fee per year. Some cities have no fee. Bloomington, Indiana kind of went through an effort similar to this where they felt were in effect disincentivizing something that with fees and things of that sort that they decided to waive the fee. But my feeling is, okay, let's keep the fee, but I think certainly increasing it just raises the bar again. I think, in my view, especially in that we're only talking about, at this point, 30 permits, and perhaps one of the reasons we have 30 is because of the associated cost, because it's not just the permit. I mean, you have to build the coop. You have, depending upon the food sources, you may have to purchase chicken feed. So it's not an easy task, and there are costs associated with it. I do think increasing the number of hens to 6 makes the financial aspects of this not quite as difficult. And then the last item, I liked what Cedar Rapids was doing there too. There was no requirement to get permission, but because in a sense of the kind of unusual nature, perhaps we could say, of having chickens around in one's neighborhood, I think it's kind of the neighborly thing to do, to just let people know that you're planning on getting chickens. Again, in my experience, there's been nothing but strong support in the neighborhood for the fact that there are chickens around. The kids love them. They are fascinated by the idea that this is where we get our eggs. There is something curious about going to the coop in the morning, and they lay them in a box, and you open up the lid to the box, and there are eggs in there. We don't get our eggs from the supermarket. We get them, from the chickens who live right on our property. So I think it's actually, there are many benefits to doing this. I was noticing that, in our kind of, accelerating our climate action plan, it talks about expanding access to healthy local foods. There's nothing more local than having a food source in your backyard. So I think all we can do to try to make it easier, the better, and that's why I landed where I did on these issues.
I have to admit that I've always been a big city girl, never been around farms or chickens or anything, so I had to check around to see if the chicken doesn't need a rooster to lay eggs, and I found that out, that no, they don't. That's fertilized versus unfertilized, so that was kind of an interesting little tidbit. So I would not be in favor. I agree with the staff's recommendation about not having the roosters, and we haven't had that many requests for roosters. The most requests, and I applaud the Prairie Hill folks, they were the first ones that I'd heard from about this, because I hadn't thought about the way it reads now as being the single-family units, and they're not really single-family units. They have one unit that has like a number of studio apartments. So I don't know if we need to clarify that multifamily unit just a little bit more. Maybe Eric could help guide us on that so that they would be included in that, because as it sounds now, it's a little confusing that maybe they wouldn't be considered that, because what do you consider a multifamily unit? But I would be in favor of that, and I agree with the others that have said that increasing the fee, I'm not in favor of that. And increasing to 6 hens, I agree with that too.
Counselor, do you have a stance on the consent versus notification?
Notification, I would think, because my daughter lives in the Longfellow neighborhood, and there's actually several homes in that neighborhood that have chickens, and you'd never know it. And of course, she moved in after the fact, but wasn't notified that. But we just know from the neighbors saying. And occasionally on Facebook, they'll say, "Oh, one of the Dearborn chickens is loose." They occasionally do get loose, but nobody's really too alarmed about it, and it doesn't cause any harm. And the neighbors just kind of, okay, shoo, get back home, and it's really not a problem. So I would think, but you might have some chicken haters out there, and so I think just notify them saying, hey, they're going to have this. If you notice that they're loose or they're causing a problem, let us know. So notification would be fine with me.
I agree. The no roosters. Yes, multifamily buildings. Yes, staff should be granted some discretion. Maximum number of hens increased to 6. I'm fine with the fee staying the same and notification rather than consent.
I would agree with Councilor Burgess on all of those. I have one question, though. What is the notification actually, other than just being a nice neighbor? I mean, does that accomplish much? I mean, if somebody gets a notification and then still wants to say, no, you can't do it, that's, I guess.
Well, I mean, obviously, legally, the difference between notification and consent is, we could just, if they say, no, you can't do it, well, I'm going to do it. I mean, that's.
Yeah, that's kind of like, there's, so I'm just, if that's something we want to require people to notify, if my neighbors don't have to notify me when they get a dog that barks.
Sure.
So that, I mean, as nice as that would be, but there still couldn't be, there wouldn't be much point of that. So is that an extra step that really, if we're going to get rid of the requirement of having to get permission, do we really need to leave a notification step in there? That's my question. I don't have a strong feeling on that, but I just wonder if as long as the notification doesn't actually trigger anything that anybody else has a say in it.
I guess the question I might have for you on that same line, since or anyone, what would be like a nuisance or example of nuisances to a neighbor? They don't bark.
Arguably, dogs and cats, in my view, are much more potentially a nuisance than a chicken. The chickens are a danger to themselves if they're loose. I mean, there are a number of predators that chickens have to be concerned about. We lost one of our chickens to a raccoon. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is the hens tend to squawk, which is not, in my view, an irritating sound, and it's not as repetitive or as frequent as a rooster, is when they're laying an egg. So that's sort of an indication that that's what's going on. But as I said, it's in my mind, the notification idea is that is in Iowa City somewhat unusual to have chickens. So when they start hearing them, just to let them know that in advance that this is what you're doing, and you're not expecting that there will be any impacts on the neighbors. And
so like I said, I don't have a strong feeling, but in terms of us requiring that notification, so let's say I've got 4 neighbors because, some things connect at corner or whatever, and I have a neighbor who doesn't like chickens, and then they come to the city and say, well, this person never sent me a notification. Can you yank their permit to have that chicken? I mean, I don't want to put us in a position of having to say, well, they didn't follow this step. That really is a step that doesn't really have any impact on whether or not they can have chickens in the first place. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this.
So, Eric, would the onus be on the owner of the chickens, or would the city send out, or animal control send out and say, such and such a neighbor has requested chicken permit?
Well, when you said requested a permit, I
or
said
is
requested
going
from
to
the
have,
city.
yeah.
I understand your question now. Well, I mean, that's entirely up to you. Right now, the burden is on the owner, and they have to come, and I speak with some experience because my next door neighbor is apparently one of those 30 as well, and came by to see if it would be okay with us, and we said sure. We got a plate out of cookies out of the deal, so we thought that was a pretty sweet deal. And so, I mean, right now the burden's on them. We could keep it, the same way. If you wish to see notification, to have it be on them, and then they could provide some information about that. Or if it was important to you to know that notification was being done, then probably it would be done by the city, because then you would know for sure. On a related matter, I want to point out, because I didn't make it clear before, that First Assistant City Attorney Sue Dulick is here, as well as Animal Services representative as well. So if you have questions specifically about, either kind of downsides to moving from consent to notification, or the ability to continue doing the work without raising fees, or I think there was a question about what potential nuisances are out there with chickens and so forth. Those folks are present and would be happy to answer your questions if you wanted.
I think I've got a comment surrounding the notification. I think that the notification will serve to just say, these are allowed, I'm following the regulations, they're permitted, just letting you know, so that, because in the past we have had situations where people have had unpermitted chickens, or, people are also very unfamiliar to this. This just serves as a, just like was previously said, a good neighborly thing to do. I don't think that we link it to any, revocation of the permits for the chickens. I think it just, in my opinion, will lead to less headaches when, the city gets calls saying, my neighbor, they showed up and they got half a dozen chickens in their backyard. I didn't hear anything about this. I think it's just best to say, okay, onus on the owner of the chickens to say, tell your neighbors, these are legal. We're doing the right thing here. Don't be surprised if you see one around. That's the way I see it.
So I guess what the question will be, is it a requirement, a part of for their permit? I mean, because if a neighbor chooses that they don't have a good relationship, or chooses not to go to their neighbor for whatever the reason may be, and just want to get the permit, I guess that's something that I want to get clear. If it's not, if the approval is not going to be whether the neighbor was notified or not, what is the real point of it being in the application, except saying we encourage you to notify your neighbor?
Yeah, we could do some should language rather than an actual requirement. Neighbors should, or
I think that's a
applicants
good idea.
should do that as a guideline. It's very likely to be taken as what they have to do anyway. So,
Any issues with the shit language? No?
I think that's fine. As I recall, on the Cedar Rapids chicken permits, there is a box saying you have notified your neighbors. Check the box, as I recall. But, I think should maybe just as effective.
I would invite our staff who administer the permits that if there's something that they've heard complaints about, or some way that they could recommend, things to let your neighbors know about, if we had some sort of standardized verbiage or anything, that might increase the likelihood of people letting their neighbors know. I'm not saying that's required, just to consider it.
You have
it's
to
my first
identify
council
yourself too, yeah.
I'm Devin Street from one of the animal service officers in Iowa City. No, I think that's a great idea. I think that is a big barrier for people, and why they don't get chickens is getting permission. That's the biggest reason that I deny applications. So I think at least, raising or dropping that bar, whichever perspective you take on it, is going to provide a lot more opportunity for everybody in Iowa City. And as far as the notifications, it is a kind thing to do, and we could certainly come up with something as, and invite the people who are applying for those applications, give them feedback. This is, what we would recommend saying to your neighbors. If that's something that you want to do, if you don't want to do, then don't. But just kind of be the kind person to do it. And, like you said, some people just don't click with their neighbors, and it's just not going to happen. And that would probably create a rift and more arguments than it would be necessary. So something, if they have a good relationship, sure, but.
do you have an estimate, just an educated guess, on how many in the last couple years you've had to turn down because of the consent?
I've been doing this for 2 years, and I think I've turned down 2 or 3.
Okay.
And it's only ever one neighbor. Usually it's because somebody's bought a house and they're flipping it, and they don't want to have chickens in the yard next door and have that be a reason that they can't sell it. And then some of them are just neighbors who just don't want chickens.
So if we move forward with this, would we also feel comfortable letting those people know that, their applications might be accepted this time? The people that have had their applications denied based on one neighbor not consenting?
Sure.
I'm asking.
You're saying that they can look in their records and go back to people, or
Yes.
the announcement is going to be on the front page and those interested?
Both.
Can try again.
Both, yeah.
I'm not sure about going back,
I mean,
but certainly,
would we do that for any other
yeah.
policy changes to go back to people who are, you know, I mean, I realize it's a very small number, but I'm also like, if they're interested, this is, I just saw the photographer. I know that it's going to be covered. And so I guess I just wonder about, is this the type of thing that we would do for all shifts in our, do you know what I mean?
It certainly seems like something that staff could exercise their discretion to do or not, and we're
Right.
not directing
Sure.
one way.
Right,
But
there. Yeah.
given
Yeah.
that it's a handful,
Yeah, it's very few.
3.
So,
So,
Any thoughts on, like, the fee?
I think I'm fine with what it looks like the majority of council said of just keeping the fee the same.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I don't know if you all had any comments about the fee, if there was any comparison done to other services that you all provide.
No, we were just looking at the amount of time it takes us to put in to approve them. Some of them take significantly longer than others, but I think eliminating the need for permission from neighbors is going to significantly eliminate a lot of time that we spend on those applications, because sometimes it can take us weeks to get a hold of landlords or property owners to be able to get that approval. So even if that's something where you're looking at knocking it down to the 75, then that's more justifiable too, because it takes a lot of work off of our plate trying to get that figured out.
Any other questions? All right, well, I've heard a majority of the council say no roosters. Yes to Coops being allowed in multi-family buildings consistent with the staff recommendations. Staff being granted discretion, as well as the hand count to up to 6. And then council wants to keep the application fee at $100 as it is currently. And then there will be no neighbor required consent, and just some, maybe a pamphlet or something to those being granted, just to share with their neighbors should they choose. All right.
Okay, we'll draft up the ordinance and have it for you, your consideration in a future meeting.
Thank you. All right. Awesome. We're going to move on to item number 2, which is review of the 2020 preliminary plan to accelerate community policing. And I do see our chief Liston is present with us. And so I'll invite you up at this time.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Dustin Liston, Chief of Police. As you can see, the city manager provided a memo. It's a pretty in-depth memo going over each of the 36 proposed changes when the plan was submitted to you. I believe it was in December of 2020. It was just before I got here, actually. But we've been steadily knocking off things or completing tasks on that. For the most part, we've gotten most of them done. If you look through the memo, you can see an update on each one of those. There's a couple of them that we weren't able to do, or there may have not been interest of the council. A couple things, staffing-wise, we haven't been able to get to yet. But I'm pretty proud of the work that's been done on that. But I think now is an opportunity for you all to weigh in on where you'd like us to go with it. If there's things you want, this was a plan that was done 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago by the city manager's office, and we can certainly take it many different directions. It wasn't an end all. It was just a start. It was the preliminary plan, and it's a constant evolution. I like to think of it as a live document that we can keep changing, and with your all's guidance, we're happy to try new things or work on new projects. So it's just an opportunity. If you have any questions of me, anything you saw in there, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
I have a number of sort of like this laundry list of comments and questions, but I figure I'm just going to jump in for a couple of like what I hope are just quick hitters, because I know that there are other counselors who have sort of like perhaps bigger scope questions. And I noticed also in going through this that there's a number of these bullets that actually kind of intersect. So one of them that struck me that while it's been done, it's number 26, and it was about doing the PSA for, excuse me while I find the specific language.
Race-based calls.
Yes. Just to think of that as a recurring
Sure.
event, because it's great that it was given there, but as we all know, people be like, I missed it. What are you talking, huh? Right? So I just think that there could be that repetition of having this be at the least an annual event of getting this out through all the different channels as possible. I think that that's just sort of a good thing to build into kind of SOP to make sure people are aware of it. And then I did have a question as well, and maybe this is a broad question, but I noticed this in something that, in fact, I know private therapists, right, when you call to make an appointment, they actually, if you hit their voicemail, they say, if this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911. That has not, the 988 number has not actually gotten sort of like filtered through, so that primary mental health caregivers are not sort of incorporating that in. And I was just wondering, actually, as a working session collective body, if we could think about how that could go out there. And maybe it's just an item for us to follow up on. I'm not sure how the city does this with individuals, but I know that there's a number of partnerships and interconnections and relationship building that the police department has. So that would be one area that's perfect for starting to spread that.
Sure.
So I have a lot of other things, but I'm going to pause because there's just sort of like quick hit type things and allow others to maybe talk more thematically about a few things so that I don't monopolize right now.
Mayor Pro Tem, just a quick question on this, and maybe Chief Liston can help on this with the Joint Emergency Communications Commission. I'm on that committee, and I know they've been talking about integrating the 988 into the 911 calls, and I don't know if that would help with what you're talking about, or what your thoughts on that, Chief Liston, are, that's going to help with that to more closely know which calls need to go where.
Yeah, and I think the pilot project just started, the diversion with 9. It just started this month, actually. So I'm anxiously awaiting the results of that, but we're headed in the right direction on that, with community taking the lead on it.
Chief, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. I just wanted to get some clarification on Update 10. Update 10 is about, let me scroll up here just to be sure, CIT training. So there was no specific statistic in there as to how many of our officers have been CIT trained or trained in de-escalation techniques. So I'm wondering if you can more so shed light onto either those numbers, or if this is a standard part of onboarding and so all officers are trained.
Yes, all officers in Johnson County are trained. We host the class annually. It's usually hosted every May. And for the new officers that we've onboarded in the countywide, whether it's a deputy or whether it's someone from North Liberty, they all go to it. So that's one of the things we were really proud of as a county, that for the last several years we've been able to do that. It's a week-long course, and it's taught by community partners, by our staff. Every department in the county provides staff to teach, and then there's local mental health providers that teach it. I think we're probably one of the leaders in that in the state. I can tell you that even my former agency, everyone wasn't CIT trained, so that everybody on our department is CIT trained.
Thank you for the clarification.
Who comes up, I'm just curious now, who creates the curriculum for that? Do we do that in-house, or is that from?
Well, it's with a group. We work with our partners at the county as well, and then our local mental health providers. They teach portions of it. It's been, the curriculum was created years ago, and we keep updating it. We have 2 in-house instructors, Colin Fowler and Andrew McKnight. They present at the annual CIT conference. They've been doing this for quite a while, and they're very good at it.
Mental health was mentioned, and I just have to speak for myself to say that it has to continue to be a priority for all of us, and for the mental health workers out there and the police department. And I had some concerns because no one from communities here, though I don't know, but maybe you can speak to it. They've had some trouble like filling the positions. do you know if they're searched, do they search outside of the area? Is it possible to do a nationwide search, go to the schools that, graduate people that are major in psychology and treating mental health issues? Or maybe you won't be able to answer that, but that's my concern, because I think that's a priority. It's becoming increasingly more important, and more so than just having the 988 number out there.
Right. I have a meeting with Sarah Nelson next week, and we're going to talk about that. I'm assuming they're having staffing issues just like everybody else does. I know they do recruit and they put out, but I couldn't speak to exactly what they do for recruiting efforts. But I think they're having just staffing issues just like every other agency, and it's hard to get people in the workforce now, and I don't need to tell you guys,
Yeah,
that's a
it's true.
difficult
That's
job.
true.
It's a difficult job, and we're asking a lot of those people, especially right now. So,
Just to make sure I'm clear, that's actually, we help fund that position, but the position itself is Communities, not ours.
correct. It's an employee of Communities. We have one. We had two. That person left, and they're still trying to fill that second
Okay,
position.
just making sure that that's,
Yep, not our employee though. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just jump in with maybe kind of a zoomed out conversation. I hope that maybe we can talk about some goals to move forward. As Chief, you said, like, this is a living document and the plan sort of changes as we accomplish various things. I think it's really fantastic to see some of these specific, action items within the plan that have been, that at the time were like, we could, years from now, try and have integrated 911 and mobile crisis response. And yeah, that went live last week, I think. So it's really, really, really powerful to see many of these things coming along. Given the conversations that we've had about the budget and the department and staffing and challenges in staffing, I think looking at kind of the two areas on the front end of the continuum of calls for service is what I would urge us to try and do, and see if we can even set some goals that might be measurable. In the context of trying to set goals, I noticed in Jeff's memo the kind of a warning to us, I think, of you need good data, as well as the fact that the department's data analyst position is unfilled, right? That remains the case. And that was Dave Schwint, I believe, who has retired.
Right. He still works a little bit part-time for us, as much as we can ask him to do. But yeah. You're right.
And so I think those things do somewhat go together, because whatever we direct as areas of emphasis, or however we decide to prioritize parts of the plan, I think it's really important that we make sure we have those mechanisms for tracking the information. I do know, just from even talking with Jeff this last Friday, that I think his intent is to update the statistics that were in this plan from December 2020 on things like calls for service and percentage of calls that are behavior-based and that kind of thing, because it's been a few years since we've had that data, and I think it'll be really important to see trends. But what I would urge us to consider is to really focus on that front end of the continuum of calls for service, which is prevention and diversion. And if we can ask the department and the city manager to say, what actions do you think the city can take to help prevent calls for service? Some of the things that are highlighted in the plan is that the support that we provide to nonprofits is part of prevention, right? Making sure that people have resources available and that those resources are robust is part of preventing the people getting to a point where they may be in crisis and they may need to call. Another thing is, so there's that financial support, which we have various buckets already for. And we could consider asking for projects that from nonprofits to say, this particular bit of this aid to agencies, or whatever bucket it might want, we might want to, staff might want to suggest, like, give us projects that you believe as a service provider would help on the prevention side. Like, what do you think would help keep people from getting to crisis most effectively based on what you see in the community? That's one possible idea. I think we've also talked about the educational component, and I think the PSA, Megan, that you mentioned is one small piece of that, right? Like, don't call the cops for, because you see children running around in the neighborhood you haven't seen there before, something like that. I think there's a lot more that we could do on that communication side, and using staff, even just like our communication staff outside the department, and Lee's position, which is within the city manager's office, to try and use some of that data-driven analysis to say, what are those most common resident-initiated calls for service where the officers themselves can identify, we're not the best equipped to do this, or we don't think this should have been a call in the first place, and just create some education around that. I know we did the race-based calls, but I don't know, Chief, do you know if we've actually done that analysis of what people are
No, but we
calling
do
for?
have, just because we don't have that position filled, we still do have people who can get stats. So, and I think that is important. One of the things I think most of us know, some people might be surprised, is how a few number of people call the police all the time. And that's one of the things we do with our community outreach and also with our mental health liaison, is let them know when it is appropriate and when it's not. We certainly don't want to discourage people from calling the police when they need to call police, but for some people it's the first thing they think of, instead of calling a neighbor or so that's one of the things I think there's a big opportunity. We try to reach those people who we know are heavy users of 911, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
And another thing I know you've been working on that Jeff has shared with me is looking at interventions based on locations for concentrations of calls for service. So if we get a ton of calls at one particular spot, just trying to get underneath that and say, what's happening that there are so many calls for service in that spot? So I think that would be something we could set, measurable goals to try and reduce, on a percentage basis or a per capita basis, on the prevention side. And then lastly, on the prevention side, just the number one action item that we articulated in our strategic plan under the safety, and by number one, I mean it was at the top of the list of described action items, was the community violence interruption, which I don't know, Mayor, if you have any updates on that program.
Yes.
Or not.
Yeah, well, one, I want to say thanks for this document. I think you mentioned some of the things that we thought was a dream, and here we are at 988, being in action and stuff like that. And I would agree that the prevention, some thoughts on prevention with our social service agencies would be good. Certainly, we'll see how 988 kind of really get to going within our community. I am a part of the Community Violence Intervention Steering Committee. We just hired our director, who is going to be starting the first meeting, tomorrow, and so that'll be great. There's some great community folks around the table, and looking forward to that. So we've had about 3 meetings, and a lot of that was just getting some background about what this could look like, as well as talking about what we wanted to see in the person that would lead us in this effort as a staff. And so we accomplished hiring someone, and tomorrow will be their first day meeting with the steering committee. So more on that in the near future. There's not much that I really wanted to dig into the report about, except I wanted to make sure that of course, the prevention or things that we're doing for the mental health, I think Councilor Teller talked about that, is going to be at the forefront of what we want to accomplish as this council, is making sure that we're talking to our partners to have those conversations, like what can we do different. The communication piece, the PSA, is going to be critical. The thing that I also wanted to mention is that I feel like the conversation is very separate to a certain degree if we're talking about cutting police positions. That, in my opinion, needs to be had at staff level within the department as they're seeing different trends or they're looking at what their staffing ratios are. So I just wanted to be clear that, my hope is that we can focus in on, the document before us, what are ways that we can really enhance the services, what's missing. And I think those collaborations, as Councilor Burgess mentioned, going to those service providers is great, just to say, hey, what are you seeing and what can we do as a team, because it's beyond just the city and the police department working on this.
Well, and I would add, too, that in that prevent, we're looking at that graphic that has prevent, divert, co-respond, stabilize, and connect. And it really is all the way over at prevention that, in honesty, so much of our strategic plan is actually focused on doing that, because the core issues that create trauma and behavior that ends up, perhaps hurting self, hurting others, has to do with things like food insecurity, education issues, transportation. So the very things that we as a city are looking at in these other pillars really are part of a holistic framework that is to help the police, to help the community, not get to a point where there's police response. It's to make sure that we don't get there. So that's just, I think of it as we're having a very specific conversation about the 36 points. And I truly was bowled over when I saw how much work has been done in such a short amount of time and during the pandemic as well, right? So thank you for that. But I also realized the onus is on us as well. In those 4 types of responses, what we want to do is bolster Iowa City as a place that can help mitigate or lessen the stressors that lead to other things. So sort of sounds soapboxy, but I just felt like it also is sort of like that's what we do in every meeting, is trying to figure out, is affordable housing, free fare for buses, how do we get people to childcare. So we have all of these other things, and that's part of looking at the whole of how do we have a good public safety. So that's one thing. So I'm off my soapbox now. But I have a question for you, because you've been living with this and you have your teams and your departments, doing this work all the time. What do you see, what's missing in here? What opportunities do you think could be useful? And I know this is pretty exhaustive, and yet I'm sure it's not exhaustive. So I was just wondering if there was anything missing on here that you're like, what, I think this could be another piece that could really help the efforts.
I think some of the things we just, like the mayor mentioned, the violence interruption thing, that's one thing that probably should have been on here, but I don't think we knew about it at the time. So just because it's not on this list doesn't mean it's not something we're doing. Right. I think this was, as the memo pointed out, this is something that city staff came up with in a few months, 2.5 years ago, trying to anticipate where all this was headed. And I think they did a pretty good job of it, but it doesn't encompass everything. There's not one thing that I think, that should have been here. And if there is, we're doing it anyhow. Just because this isn't the only thing we're doing. We're doing plenty of different things that just didn't make the list. I think filling our specialty positions would be helpful, specifically the crime analyst. I used to run a group of crime analysts at my former agency, and I know the value that they provide. It makes us work a lot smarter rather than harder. So I want to get to that, and I think in most agencies that typically becomes a civilian position anyhow. You don't have to spend a sworn officer position on that spot. So I would anticipate seeing that on my next budget request, just sneak preview. So, but that's something I think we would look at. And then that would open up having a really quality crime analyst would really give us a lot of information, like Councilor Burgess was talking about, that then we can base these decisions off of. So.
Part of the, oh, go right ahead.
Sure.
Well, I was just going to mention a part of the community intervention, community violence intervention program that we talked about so far was identifying some of those offenders. You'll determine which, individuals you want to go out after. And it really is a community effort. You bring in family, you bring in friends to try to connect with them and say, hey, can we, turn this around? And so, looking forward to, this community or this committee, steering committee, diving into this a little bit so that we can get some activities out in the community with some of these individuals. And so, like I said, she's just starting. And so we'll have the first meeting with her tomorrow to take us through a lot of next steps.
First of all, wanted to say thanks because, as you pointed out, this document was sort of created right before you got here. And so since you've been here, you can go through this list and check a lot of boxes, see progress. Some things accomplished, some things progress, some things still need to be done, or maybe different priorities need to be picked out. So thank you for that, and thank you to the department for doing that. And thank you also to city staff who put together this update. 36 different moving pieces, and as you say, there's more to the picture than just these 36. That's a lot of work, and putting this together in a way that's understandable and digestible was really helpful. And hopefully it's something, too, that members of the public, are aware. They can go onto the information packet and look through themselves. I just think it's a lot of useful information. One of my questions is actually more for the council, although certainly would involve staff and the chief. What do we want to do with this now? This update is great, and I love this, but I was too thinking about, as I'm reading through these, like, so here's some stuff we should go back and maybe look at. I don't know, something, or is the training enough? What other sorts of things for coordination? So my question is, do we want to direct staff to, update this for 2023, as opposed to 2020? Is that something worthwhile doing so that we can look at which things and, kind of go, which things do we need to keep pushing on? Which things do we need to refocus? What are some of the new efforts that we have to include in that as a way to sort of, give us a roadmap, just like we do with the strategic plan, so that the council's giving some, hey, these are the things that we think are priorities. And so then, every couple of years further down the road, then we can come and say, okay, how have we done on these? And is that a direction we want to head in? I know we're asking resources and things like that, but that seems like, that's when I was reading this, that just seemed like the logical thing. Is how do we move forward, because there's good stuff here, but what's next?
So we did have a graph, and it had one that said completed, in progress, and then one that said ongoing. It is, you always have to be working on it. It's never ending.
Sure.
So certainly we can do that. I wonder if there's not because when you look at all of this, continuously, you could kind of get lost and not focused.
Right.
So I wonder if there's not a way for us to do that first step again, in progress, completed, ongoing. And if it's more of looking at our strategic plan and tying into, some of this, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and that's, for example, we talked about hiring a second liaison. Well, maybe as we take a look at a new set of priorities, yes, that, but maybe a third and fourth, or getting up to that 24/7 would be as we take a look at what does that goal look like now, 3 years later, as we update this kind of stuff. And to me, that would be probably worth some time and effort, although, that would involve a lot of stakeholders. But
Well, I think ideally, if we can quantify goals that are based around outcomes, right, and then staff figures out how to achieve that. I mean, I think, I get uncomfortable saying, despite my last several months of advocating, I get uncomfortable saying, which position should be doing what. I mean, I think saying having round-the-clock service for co-response for behavioral and mental health calls as a priority within X number of time, and then staff, you figure it out, I would be more comfortable with that that kind of direction, you know. So on the prevention side, like saying right now we have X number of calls per service per capita per year, per month, or however you want to quantify it, we would like to see some measurable reduction. And right now we don't know because we're not looking at the data in that particular way, but we could say what it is now and we could put something aspirational just to benchmark against, right? To say, okay, if we direct prioritizing a reduction in calls, you know, a prevention of calls for service based on education, based on, you know, location-based interventions, whatever it is. But the staff would be deciding the how. We set the metrics, and then we come back in a year. Because I think plans like this are, you know, it's just sort of like a snapshot in time. Right? It's just sort of like, these are the actions that we know about, and I don't feel like we are the best equipped to say this particular action, you know, is the way to achieve that goal.
Great.
I think I can see kind of a hybrid of that, sort of going with kind of like in creation of an update would be sort of that, like we say exactly what you'd said, here's what we want to have for an outcome, and then give that to staff and have staff say, okay, well, here's what we think we want to put, and then we can, kind of like what they did with, I assume, I guess some of you were here, some of us were here, some of us weren't, but that kind of a process. Like we want to see better interventions with mental health that don't require, you know, we want to see more compassionate care, everything else. And so, but what I like about these, what appeals to me about this list is there were concrete, actionable things, which now we see I think I see a benefit in that now, because when they go back and say, what have you done with this? It's not just, it's defined enough that you can't just sort of throw some clever words at it and make it sound good. There's literally things you can either say did or did not happen or have happened up to this degree. And I find real value in that.
I have a question for the police chief. Some of the stuff that's in this document, you have in your report or in a report. Do you have any of this in a report of any type?
I don't understand what you're asking.
So do you do, so in an annual
Oh,
report?
yes, absolutely. And
Yes.
I know it's June now, but it's, the draft is done. We'll be publishing it by probably the end of the week. But yeah, it'll have, but it'll look very similar to last year's report. You know, it's big numbers, not diving in on specifically mental health calls. But that, you know, I think once we, especially if we get some of these positions filled, we could maybe take deeper dives. I don't know if it needs to be in the annual report, but certainly would influence some of the decisions we're making. But yes, we do have some of these statistics in the annual
So
report.
what I was just getting to is that, you know, some of this, what we would like to see on an annual basis can be in a report from the chief's office, potentially.
Well, I too, Councilor Burgess's emphasis on sort of focusing on the prevention end of the continuum has always been my focus. And it happens to kind of intersect with an aspect of living in Iowa City where I feel most unsafe, and that's traffic. You know, it's one case where I kind of relinquish my privilege and primarily walk around Iowa City as opposed to drive around Iowa City. Although I will say, even since this report was published, that cars have gotten bigger. They are astonishingly larger in size and weight. And it seems like it's sort of just been upon us in the last several years. And they seem to be going faster. So it seems to me the concerns I've had have only been exacerbated by those two facts. And we have a lot of information on traffic as well. And so I think it lends itself to the metrics. And in fact, it was, you know, the report that highlighted for me that 25% of our calls for service are traffic and collision related. That's, you know, comparing traffic to, say, mental health is about 9%. So it's a huge number, really. And what I was arguing back in 2020 was there are two ways I saw that we could try to reduce calls for service. One had to do with the redesign of our streets, many of which, in effect, encourage illegal speeding. So the idea of self-regulating streets, where we redesign our streets, and we have some in the strategic plan, I don't know what their status is, which is one of my frustrations. In terms of trying to reduce calls for service, Burlington, Market, Jefferson, Dodge, Governor are some of our major streets where I suspect self-regulating those streets in the ways that would be appropriate could very well reduce our calls for service and make our streets more safe. The other, which is noted in the report, was that the majority on City Council has not shown an interest in revisiting the technology of traffic cameras. And you also noted that a number of cities are now considering, or have in fact, I think, approved the use of traffic cameras. Dubuque, Marion, I guess they're considering, as well as University Heights. I think in a way to me, that's a suggestion that this is, the fact that our streets seem less safe is a phenomenon that's widespread. In fact, locally, 2 people died on our streets. I mean, that to me was a big deal. I understand that one could say, well, these were outlier events, and however one might want to try to normalize them. But to me, our streets the speeds we see on our streets need to be slowed down. And I'm understanding that in many cities, this whole idea of drag racing on city streets is common. So how can we redesign those streets so that it's more difficult for that type of drag racing to take place? But with respect to the cameras, and I personally, I emphasized this in 2020 and deliberately said, let's pull back on the cameras and just see if we can better design our streets and approach it that way first, and then consider the cameras. At this point, I at least am interested in seeing the council, if you're asking for ways of reducing calls for service, we reconsider that. And I think when we first moved here 13 years ago, I think the consideration was Highways 1 and 6, that the police department was proposing the cameras. Those seem like very logical streets to consider if we were to use cameras. They're difficult, I would imagine, to self-regulate, and we know we have the data that shows that there's a lot of collisions that are taking place there. So I personally have gone through kind of a change of position on the use of cameras. I do feel on our state highways 1 and 6, we should consider them. Self-regulating those streets, I think, would be very time-consuming and expensive. Arguably, and the way I would want to argue the use of the cameras would be whatever revenues they generate could be earmarked for making our streets safer. Because in some cases, it does cost real money to do that. But again, this is 25% of our calls for service. It's a huge piece. The current situation out on the streets, many people do not feel safe. I don't feel safe. I don't think I'm alone in this. And it also frustrates people moving to bicycling or walking because they just simply don't feel safe doing those things, as well as driving. I mean, I'm seeing, with these larger cars, I don't feel all that safe at certain intersections because my sight lines are compromised by large parked vehicles that don't allow me to see what's coming. So anyway, that's sort of where I am on this. I really feel that is 25% of our calls for service. I'd be interested to know to what degree that number has dropped. But I think it's something I think potentially lends itself to seeing significant reductions in calls for service if we proactively, and as I said, approach this. There are some in our strategic plan, but the movement has been a little bit slow up to this point. But on Highways 1 and 6, perhaps we should revisit that and consider the cameras.
So it's interesting that you brought up the cameras because I did as in reading this point, think through, there could be potentially help with the reduction in service calls. That said, I would definitely, and I'm sure that this would be something that, if it got to it, that we would consider very carefully where the placement of them are. One of the main reasons for the 36 points was actually talking about Black Lives Matter and about equity concerns. And so if we only put cameras on 1 and 6, that runs right through the South District. So to me, that seems it's actually potentially exacerbating the issue. So I think that we would want to be very careful to think about, and I'm with you on saying this could actually, because I'm kind of thinking of this again in those 4 parts. And on the one hand, we want prevention of calls, but I'm also thinking about, and I know that there's a section of the public that is not all that concerned with this, but I'm very concerned with how the professionalism and the career health of the department is doing. And so the amount of overtime that officers are having to spend is unacceptable. And yet that's the job right now, for them to be able to give the service that, whether it's heavy callers or honest needs. And we have there's not going to be any one solution, right? But at the same time that we're looking at prevention, we also need to be looking at how we can support those people who are actually still serving the community in very important ways. So I do think, it's a long-winded way to get to where you're at, to say, I think it's worth thinking about the use of cameras, but it would have to be very, very intentional and very, very careful, because Highway 1 and 6 are not used for pedestrians because they are state. You're correct that there's a lot of traffic incidents, but it's also a major thoroughfare for people all along in your district, Pauline, and in mine. So at any rate, I'm just kind of spinning in a couple of different directions about this to respond to you that I think it could be worth thinking about. But the other piece is that at the same time that council right now has been looking a lot, and rightfully so, at prevention, we also need to look at how are we going to support the people in this department who are doing really hard jobs and who are doing it under the weight of, frankly, a lot of public opinion that makes their jobs even harder. So as we look at ways to be able to restructure the police department, it's also about how are we going to help support them too.
I think you actually kind of you anticipated the next comments I was going to make, was to say that the prevention very important. Absolutely, our emphasis, that preventing everything we can do and all the things you've mentioned earlier about ways to prevent crime, but also when responses have to happen. And so as we take a look at the strategic, or not strategic plan, if we look at redoing this plan, I just wanted to also voice the idea that some of the stuff in this that needs to continue to be brought forward, I thought was really positive, was looking at what do those responses look like. So discussions about the field training program, the critical incident training program. There's a number of different things. The mental health support for the officers themselves, things like that too, are things that I would certainly not want to fall away because we didn't mention it up here. So I was going to specifically mention some of those things because I think that is important. When we have responses, we want that response to be the best quality for our public, and we do. We manage human beings, right? That we're sort of the bosses of all of our city employees, including the police department. So we do have, I think, a responsibility to be fair and good bosses, in that if we ask somebody to do a job, we should give them the tools to do that job and do it safely, and to provide the best possible service for our community members. And policing is obviously its own special thing, but some of those things I think hold true, and burnout and those kinds of things, which you brought to us before. A year ago, I think we were hearing about concerns about some of that, which is important for us to hear, and good for us to know that as well, so we can include that in our calculations. So that would be something too that I think that's important. So the prevention won't always work, and we do have responses. What does that response look like? What's the quality of that response? And how do we then come up with action items to try and, us or for staff, or to give, support staff in their initiatives, which is kind of what this is, right? They've listed priorities and we've supported those. sometimes through funding different programs and positions, sometimes through just other sorts of support, hopefully praise from time to time as well. And so, yeah, so I mean, just so those things don't fall away, and nobody would mistake that those aren't also priorities as well as, you know, the very, very worthy priorities of prevention.
So, Council,
Can I just follow up on that real quick, Mayor? So I think having, you know, I appreciate all of those comments, and I think no department should have to run with 2.5 hours of overtime for every hour of regular service, which I think was the statistic that Jeff gave us a couple months ago. And so I think as long as we're in the moment that we've been in for a few years of not having as many staff as, you know, you would like to have that service level be more manageable for the officers, really looking at, you know, things to take off the plate of the department, and the 988 911 integration and the mobile crisis bump that we gave with the ARPA money. I mean, I think there's even more opportunities there, and for us to look at, you know, continuing the support of those first responders that, you know, if they don't require an officer, we can hopefully on the front end say someone else can attend to those kinds of things. I appreciate and I hear, you know, the chief and I have talked before about officers want to be able to respond to calls that are just helpful, you know, and not just responding to acute criminal situations. And I think as long as we have officers, they're going to continue to do that. And I think having the opportunities for, you know, Mayor and I have talked about the kinds of calls that the fire department responds to, and listening to the fire chief talk about really looking at their role as risk elimination or risk reduction for the community. So just to come back to, Sean, your point about like concrete things, I think we might want to hear from some of those providers on like what are ways that they could pick up more calls that we know are happening if the dispatch is effective, right? I was pitched from Community Crisis Services a model that not just would have mental health workers, but would have a nurse practitioner, medics, and mental health providers who could be dispatched as one unit. Because currently mobile crisis can only respond to behavioral mental health calls, and they make referrals, but they can't prescribe and they can't deal with injuries effectively. So if we think of all the calls for service that are medical on the fire department side, on the ambulance side, and the proportion, you know, in this report that are even police respond to, I just think there's a lot of opportunities there that could help relieve some of the pressure that the department is currently handling, and would achieve the goal of diverting calls for service to unarmed professionals, which was an actual goal that we've articulated. So I think if we want to hear a presentation from folks on that in a future work session, that would be a concrete thing we could do.
I think just really quickly to we should acknowledge the work of our CPRB, our Police Review Board, because at the time that we were setting these things up, I think we were one of the very few in the area, the cities or communities that had one, and I think other cities sort of based their development on ours. And so I'd just like to commend and appreciate the decisions they make, and I think that we need to do what we can to make sure that they always have a full and active board, and I just really appreciate and would not like to acknowledge them.
I was just going to say very quickly to follow up, I would be interested in a working session that would bring others together, because, in fact, I think it was you that I was talking to, that the analogy that I used was that that the police department is finding itself, I think, in a lot of times, because 911 is so ubiquitous, that it's like the school district, right? There's so much that's put on your plate that isn't necessarily like your primary response. And so I like the idea of being able to say, how do we kind of spread this around so that the right professionals are there without taking away any of the expertise of the police, and I strongly believe that it should not just be acute criminal or whatever the phrase was that you used. It was very well said. I think that the police need to be involved in the community in a lot of different ways that actually is documented here. But I like the idea of being able to see, are there others where that response could be? So I would be in favor of a working session at some point where there is a presentation from these others. So I'm sorry, I cut you off, Andrew.
I just want to respond to that, if really quickly. I would be in favor of a work session, but I believe that our police department and our fire department, or whoever is a part of that system, should have meetings before that comes to us.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I think I just want to kind of summarize a bit of my thoughts. I mean, throughout this whole conversation, I keep getting to this thought of yes and. In that way, I agree with you, Councillor Harmson, that I kind of see a really good opportunity for a melding of different perspectives up here. The focusing on what we want our goals to be and what we want the situation to be that Councillor Burgess talks about, as well as also defining some of these specific goals. I think that pretty good results in most cases. So I agree with the focus on prevention. I think that the prevention needs to be data-driven, which leads us to more community partnerships, leads us to a greater importance on that analyst position. At the same time, I think that there's an even further argument to go for the specific goals in combination with rewriting the plan, I should say, or updating the plan. Let's say that. In addition to giving those broader goals at the same time, I think that they're enriched by happening and being implemented simultaneously. And ultimately, I see it as, this document was created in a moment, like was previously said. It signifies the thoughts and feelings and ideas of a particular moment, and we are now far past that moment. And so I think that it would be a good idea for us to go back through this plan, set those broader goals for the Department of Public Safety in this community, while at the same time not allowing the progress that has been achieved to stagnate and to continue to push ourselves to strive for excellence in the service that we deliver. I think that that's what everyone, including the chief and on this body, wants to do. And I personally think that best happens through us being active participants and active community members and observers, and allowing ourselves to set those goals and kind of work through staff to make sure that this is something that is continually updated, something that we are continuing to work towards with regards to prevention, while at the same time understanding that there are, rapidly developing challenges that occur in our community, specifically the challenges with juveniles. Juveniles are not spoken about even once, and with having a work session on this topic, I agree that we should have an update on this, and I agree that we should be working to set broader values and priorities towards prevention. That is an enormous task, and I understand that, but it only comes because of the excellence that has been shown to me for today. So I also want to thank you for that.
So I wanted to kind of just sum up what I'm hearing as far as next steps or direction from the council. Certainly it wasn't all clear. Because there can be a lot of avenues that we can go towards. So I'll try to give my thoughts on what I kind of heard elevate. So certainly we heard annual updates on the current document. We heard prevention focus is what we want the department and the staff to be really gearing in on. Are a lot of preventions, and that could even come with some opportunities for our social services to be a part of maybe offering ways of how they can be a part of this. There may need to be some grant funding or something like that associated, but we did hear that. We heard about the work session that we'll have just to talk about a different model. For some calls that are more related to mental health calls, or we'll have to define what that actually looks like. But I feel strongly that all the parties involved in that response, the ambulance, the fire department, police department, should have conversations before that comes to us publicly. And then if this council wants to do some goals, I didn't hear that we wanted to actually write out goals. I know that we have identified very clearly what some goals are. Mental health is definitely a goal. Prevention is a goal. So I don't know if we want to wait to see if some of this, what we can get with the data analysis. While there is clearly some things that everyone can be working towards. So goals, I think, maybe in the future as we identify some, although we have a lot already identified. So that's kind of what I gathered from this discussion. Certainly juveniles is what we're seeing a lot of right now and not being addressed. My thoughts is that there are community members out there, different groups that we can bring this to and say, hey, let's sit in a room and let's talk about how can we kind of do that intervention to change some of these behaviors. So that's my thought. And if we want to, I guess I know that the community violence intervention program isn't that far, but I can certainly bring that up to them tomorrow and just maybe give a report back as to what their thoughts are or possible involvement.
I'm going to try and phrase it as a question because I know it's not on the agenda. For a future agenda item, there's been interest in setting new goals for the city manager, who is, in fact, oversees the chief of police. And I feel like at the same time, I think we've gotten a lot of meat to work with and a lot of suggestions. Because Jeff is ill right now, I feel that, sorry, just temporarily, I feel that we're kind of skipping. This is really the city managers to do this, and so maybe some of the things that we're thinking of goal-wise is really for a future session to have with the city manager about goal setting for him. Does that make sense? Because I feel like if for a second there was because I know that this document was actually written by the city manager, right? So at the same time, this is great feedback. I don't know that it's appropriate for us to give the chief of police the goals. It's not ours to do, right? So my question is, for a future work session, can we revisit the goals that we talked about, the need to set goals for the city manager since they haven't been set since 2016?
Well, I'll answer it this way. You've certainly touched on an important element of our charter, which is that council is to not direct city staff who work underneath the city manager. But absolutely, you can provide those goals to the city manager, and then he'll, as Councilor Burgess has mentioned, kind of find a way to make it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Anything else? Thank you so much for being here. Thanks. All right, we're going to move on to item number 3, clarification of agenda items. No recusals. Item number 4, information packet, June 8th. Information packet, June 15th.
We've been talking about that.
Yes, so we're going to move on to item number 5, University of Iowa Student Government Updates, USG. Welcome.
Good evening, counselors. Happy Pride, of course. It was great to see some of the counselors out there this Saturday. Get the elephant out of the room. I did dye my hair purple, so you're not.
I see it. We love it.
Yeah, I know. Decided it's Father's Day with my friend. Just a heads up, some of the times I will be late to work session, just coming late. I will be here for announcements and should be here on time. It's just that I work for Iowa Wildlife Camps, and we usually get done around, hopefully before 4, but it can run into 4. Big USG updates, though. So I will be. I have a new email, usg-city-liaison@uiowa.edu. I'll be sending my announcements there, so don't freak out too much if you can't remember it. And then another big thing is that our WeSCAP housing program through Iowa House Hotel has also just opened up its applications. We've been sharing it on social media. I'm working on a way to get that shared out with everyone to get that filled up. And it's still important that the Renter's Guide survey is still also going out, so we'll be sharing that as well. So that's really all that we have for USG. And thank you guys, and have you a good night.
Thank you. All right. Item number 6 is the council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees.
I'm working with the Outreach Subcommittee for the City of Literature to put together also a letter of support for the state of Illinois' ban on book bans. And so as a city councilor, because I had also raised this up as a potential proclamation or letter of support, we'll be working sort of in coordination with different entities so that our messaging is clear and consistent. So that we'll be meeting tomorrow.
I think before our next council meeting, we'll have a JEC meeting, so I'm sure we'll talk about some of the things we discussed this evening and get an update on 988.
I know our next council meeting is going to be the second Tuesday, July 11th, next month, and then we will be having on the following Monday the joint entities meeting. So we're going to probably need to know this topic soon, if there's a topic of
I
interest.
think there'll be plenty of time. I was going to put a memo in the packet for the July meeting.
Okay.
Because typically we have to have it turned in by that Wednesday, so.
So it'll be Tuesday and then Wednesday, okay, before the meeting. Great. So be thinking about that.
Oh, I think a while back I'd said that we'd had a presentation from Jack at one of our meetings about the emergency notification system, and so I think that'd be good to add on there.
All right, any other updates? Hearing none, we are adjourned from work session and see you all back at 6 p.m. for our formal meeting. Well, it is 6 p.m. on June 20th, 2023, and we welcome you all to your City Council. We're going to get started. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Alter.
Here.
Burgess. Here. Dunn.
Here.
Harmson.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Teague.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
All right. Item number 2 is proclamations. 2A is Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of our communities throughout this country, including Iowa City. And whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being, and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Parks and Recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, job training, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Park and Recreation is fundamental to the environment well-being of our community. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas Iowa City recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, I, Bruce Teague, Mayor of Iowa City, do hereby proclaim the month of July to be Parks and Recreation Month in Iowa City. And receiving this proclamation today is Alex, and yes, so great.
Thank you, Mayor Teague and City Council. So my name is Alex Hackman, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving as part of the Parks and Rec Commission in the city of Iowa City. And I humbly accept this proclamation on behalf of the Parks and Rec Commission, the Parks and Rec Department, and on behalf of the citizens of Iowa City. So a quote that I love is by Frank Lloyd Wright says, "I go to nature every day for inspiration in the day's work." And I hope each day that you visit one of the many parks in the city of Iowa City with over 50 parks, green spaces, and nature areas. So the Parks and Forestry Division provide and maintain adequate open spaces, parks, and trails for the residents of Iowa City. And over 99% of Iowa City residents live within a half mile of open space in this wonderful city of ours. So I invite you as well during the month of July to visit a park, to go out and explore, and to maybe visit a park that you normally haven't gone to before. And so we are extremely blessed in the Iowa City area with so many parks, as well as wonderful recreation programming as well, and encourage you to take part in those as well. Also, in celebration of the Parks and Rec Month, the City of Iowa City Parks and Rec Department will be launching a month-long sporting equipment drive throughout all of July. All new and gently used sporting goods received from the public will be collected by staff and redistributed to individuals, families, and organizations that need these types of items the most. And we understand that not having access to proper sporting equipment can be a barrier to recreation. And this is one way in which we can address the issue. So you can dust off any old gear that you may have and look out soon for an announcement coming on that. But once again, thank you for all that you do in helping preserve our natural and green spaces in Iowa City, and for all that you do in support of the Parks and Rec program. Thank you.
Alex, and thank you for serving as chair of that commission. 2B is Waste and Recycling Workers Week. Whereas according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the eradication of many diseases in the Western world is due in large part to higher public sanitation standards resulting from effective garbage disposal. And whereas the proper collection and disposal of waste, recycling, and organic waste are integral to preventing litter and dump heaps, and whereas the City of Iowa City values and celebrates dozens of workers in the public and private trash, recycling, and yard waste and organics industry in our community, and whereas the City of Iowa City promotes environmental sustainability through reducing waste and increasing recycling and composting. Now, therefore, I, Bruce Teague, Mayor of Iowa City, hereby proclaim the week of June 17th through June 23rd, 2023, as Waste and Recycling Workers Week in Iowa City, and urge our community members to recognize the valuable role that collection and removal services for trash, recycling, and yard waste play in our daily lives. And receiving this is Resource Management Superintendent Jennifer Jordan.
Thank you, Mayor Teague. Good evening, Council. As the Mayor mentioned, I'm Jen Jordan, the Resource Management Superintendent for the City of Iowa City. Our division within Public Works has about 36 employees, and we pick up trash, recycling, and organics, including food waste, which is a premier service in the state and across the nation. I'll brag for just a second. We get calls all the time from other communities across the country asking how we do what we do. So I encourage all of us to look at the services that not only Resource Management provides, but that Public Works provides on a daily basis, and be really proud of those. So thank you for this honor. Have a good evening.
Great. We're on to our consent agenda, which is items 3 through 8. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Burgess.
Second, Taylor.
All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Anything on our consent agenda? Seeing no one in person or online. Council discussion?
I actually have one thing. I recently received a question about this that I thought I knew the answer to, but I wanted to check with. For our liquor licenses, are we shall issue unless otherwise, or what is the situation there?
Oh, no, we're not shall, but we need to adhere to the standards set by the state. We do have, we can consider whether there's been compliance with local laws and that kind of thing, but we have to be careful over why we say no. In the past, there have been occasions when we have denied a liquor license renewal and been overturned by the state because they didn't think our reasons were sufficient. So that can happen.
Is that usually an administrative review, or is it a litigation?
Administrative. Okay. Well, I'm trying to think how to answer that. We litigate in front of an ALJ, sure, and that can be appealed to the district court. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Alter?
Yes.
Burgess?
Yes.
Dunn?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 9 is community comment. This is an opportunity for folks to come and speak on anything that is not on our agenda. You'll be allowed up to 3 minutes at this time, so you're welcome. And also, this is an opportunity for you all to speak to the council. We are not able to engage with you. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, is it okay if we talk a little bit about why we are not able to engage?
The main reason we're not able to engage with public is because of we have to notify the public on any topic that we're going to discuss. So.
I just want to clarify. The reason I say that is we've had a lot of people in the past that I've been aware of that have been wanting that, and I think
we can't go into discussion now.
Okay, understood. Sorry.
Yes. Welcome.
Welcome. Hi. Can I start now?
Yes.
Hi. Good evening, all. I would like to start off by reading Shelter's House mission statement. Our mission is to provide safe shelter and help people improve the quality of their lives as they move towards homelessness. And they do this by putting you in areas where there's nothing but death and destruction. All they give us is death and despair. Last week, they found T-Bone dead in his apartment. All they give us is drugs, alcoholism, and suicide, feelings of doubt, helplessness, grief, frustration, despair, uncertainty, and fear. They don't set us up for independence and prosperity. They set us up for failure and doom. When some of us just want to live out the remainders of our lives and be happy. I don't even feel good going home. When I leave here, I don't feel good going home. I just got a new water heater in April of 2023. The last time my water heater was replaced was in 1963. In 1963, I was 9 years old. I have holes and moles in my wall where I can stick my finger through my wall to the outside of my wall. With $11.1 million that was given to Shelter House, I could cure homelessness problem. But you would hold me accountable for every dollar. So why is Shelter House, with all their managers, falling short? Homeless veterans should not be in our vocabulary at all. There should be no such thing as a homeless veteran in America or anywhere. I would take every family, man, woman, and child, veteran off the street with counseling and God. I mean, we're going to need divine intervention in getting to where we want to get in life. On May 28th, I lost a friend in Davenport when that building collapsed. It was my friend's son. And when they showed it, all you could see was Brandon's clothes. His bed was gone. And since that incident happened in Davenport, more cities in Iowa are taking heed to this. Iowa City are viewing these dilapidated, condemned buildings more seriously, except Iowa City. And what this city is doing in conjunction with Shelter House is similar to a building collapsing on top of us.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on a topic that is not on our agenda? Seeing no one in person or online, we're going to move on to our item number 10A, 2023 City of Iowa City Parking Garages Maintenance and Repair. Resolution approving project manual and estimate of costs for the construction of the 2023 City of Iowa City Parking Garages Maintenance and Repair Project, establishing amount of bid security to accompany each bid, directing city clerk to post notice to bidders, and fixing time and place for receipt of bids. I'm going to open the public hearing, and welcome.
Hello, my name is Ethan Yoder. I'm with the engineering department, and I'm here to talk about the 2023 City of Iowa City Parking Garages Maintenance and Repair Project for this year. A little quick background for why we chose what we chose. The maintenance for this year was chosen based on the 5-year parking garage maintenance master plan that was put together by THP. And this year we chose to do the stair towers at Dubuque Street and Tower Place parking garages. We're going to be putting down some new membrane, concrete crack repair, painting the stairs, stair tread replacement, and spall repair. Some of the mechanical and electrical items in Tower Place and Chauncey Swan and Court Street parking garages, the stair towers will be getting new exhaust fans as well as new thermostats to go with the exhaust fans. And at Harrison Street, we're doing an infrared scanning of the electrical equipment. The estimated cost for the project is $184,500. The bid letting is July 18th with award of August 1st, and it will start September 5th, and completion should be this fall, winter. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? If so, please come forth. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Alter.
Second, Burgess.
Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Burgess.
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes.
Harmson.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Teague.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 10B, 2023 Dubuque Street, McAllister Boulevard, and landfill seating. Resolution approving project manual and an estimate of cost for the construction of the 2023 Dubuque Street, McAllister Boulevard, and landfill seating project. Establishing amount of bid security to accompany each bid, directing city clerk to post notice to bidders, and fixing time and place for receipt of bids. I'm going to open the public hearing, and welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Scott Sovers, Assistant City Engineer. Tonight I'm going to provide you a brief overview of the 2023 to 2025 seating project. Starting off, there are three seating locations for this project. The first one being McAllister Boulevard from South Gilbert Street to Sycamore Street. The second one is Dubuque Street from Brown Street to Taft Speedway. And then lastly, the third one is at the Iowa City Landfill and Recycling Center. For some background information, McAllister Boulevard and Dubuque Street were constructed as a part of the city's capital improvement program in 2020 and 2016 through 2018, respectively. On both projects, existing topsoil was stripped, salvaged, and reused. Despite the seeding and or siding completed within the prescribed spring and fall windows as per the project specifications, it didn't properly get established and is in poor condition, as you can see by the photos on the slide. This could have been from a variety of reasons. However, it is likely due to existing topsoil, the existing topsoil being overly compacted during placement, as well as the absence of organics and nutrients. At the Iowa City Landfill and Recycling Center, there are areas within the cells FY09 and FY18 that are no longer receiving waste and need final service restoration and seeding. Additionally, a temporary material storage area for the construction of the new FY23 cell, which is currently under construction, needs final service restoration and seeding. For the project overview, the project generally includes soil quality restoration, overseeding and fertilizing on McAllister Boulevard from Gilbert Street to Sycamore Street, and Dubuque Street from Brown Street to Taft Speedway. Also included in the project is seeding, fertilizing, and mulching of disturbed areas of the Iowa City landfill that are no longer being used for solid waste disposal or for the construction of the new FY23 cell. The estimated construction cost for the project is $240,000. We are hosting the public hearing tonight, which is June 20th. The bid opening is July 5th. We're planning to bring this back to you for award at the July 11th meeting, and then construction is from August 2023 through December of 2025. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just have a question.
Sure.
Based on when you were talking about potential reasons or likely reasons why it didn't take, is that mitigated in this iteration where they'll make sure that there's more nutrients and that there's
that's the plan, and that's why.
watering
That's why the project is going to extend over a couple years, because we're going to do some we're going to do the SQR 1 year, and then the following years we're going to do a couple applications of fertilizer to try to get it where it needs to be.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Seeing no one in person or online, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Harmson.
Second, Taylor.
Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 10C, Building Code Update. Ordinance amending Title 17, Chapter 1, Building Code by adopting the International Building Code 2021 edition, including Appendix K, and the International Residential Code 2021 edition, including Appendix F and Appendix J, and providing for certain amendments thereof, adopting Section 103.6 of the Iowa Code and Section 105.4 of the Code of Iowa to provide for the protection of the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of Iowa City, Iowa, and Title 17, Chapter 12 to clarify the process for building code appeals. This is the second consideration, and staff is requesting expedited action.
Mayor, I move that the rule requiring that ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Moved by Taylor,
Second.
seconded by Dunn. All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? It's the building code update. Yep. Seeing and hearing from no one. Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Could I get a motion to pass and adopt?
So moved. Done.
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
Second, Alter.
All right. Roll call, please.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 10D, Fire Code Update. Ordinance amending Title 7, Chapter 1, Fire Prevention and Protection by adopting the 2021 edition of the International Fire Code to regulate and govern the safeguarding of life and property from fire, explosion, life safety risks, or health hazards. This is second consideration, and staff is requesting expedited action.
Mayor, I move that the rule requiring that ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Moved by Taylor.
Second, Alter.
All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Seeing and hearing from no one in person or online. Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Could I get a motion to pass and adopt?
So moved. Done.
Second, Thomas.
Roll call, please.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Item 10E, Petty Cabs and Taxi Cabs. Ordinance amending Title 5 entitled Business and License Regulations, Chapter 2 entitled Taxi Cabs to define petty cabs separately from taxi cabs. Can I get a motion to give first consideration?
So moved, Alter.
Second, Burgess.
All right, and we're going to invite our city clerk to give us some comments.
Good evening. So the ordinance that's on the agenda tonight and the city code review for taxi cabs and pedicabs was initially prompted by an email from a pedicab business owner requesting changes to the code. And while staff was considering the recommended changes, we concluded it would be more clear to separate out those two parts and have pedicabs be in a separate section of the code. The ordinance moves all the pedicab provisions to a new section and will essentially not change those requirements except for the following 4 changes. Pedicab businesses should not be required to maintain manifest logs. They should not be required to have an office telephone number answerable 24/7. Drivers in training do not need prior approval of the city but cannot transport passengers while they're training. And businesses should not be required to have a unique color scheme, but the pedicabs need to look alike for purposes of identification by the public. The ordinance also prohibits the use of electronic cigarettes by drivers and passengers in taxi cabs and pedicabs. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have an odd question. It had to do with the fourth point that about not being required to have a unique color scheme, but they need to look alike for purposes of identification by the public. Is it possible for there to be individual petty vehicles that just some person could use on the Ped Mall? I guess that I'm just...
Well, they can't be on the Ped Mall.
Right. Or no, I'm sorry, and I recognize that the pedicabs can't be either. Sorry about that. I guess it's just a point of curiosity, because it was sort of like to identify that these are businesses as opposed to
I
my
see
neighbor.
what you're saying, like a personal,
Right.
somebody that has one.
Well, I guess I would add to that, what if someone wanted a petty banana boat or something? It's a pedicab, but it looks like a banana boat or something. So, because you're saying they need to look alike.
Right, within the one business. So
okay.
if they have two pedicabs, they should look similar, and they typically have signage and a phone number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I just truly was like, so I didn't realize
But
that
if
there
John
could be sort of
Smith
like
has
a
one-
personal use pedicab. Sorry,
Yeah, for paying customers only.
Right.
Okay.
So, question. This is also just a curiosity thing. Like the vapes. Where does that come from? That just seemed out of
Eric can hop in on
left
that one.
field for me at the very end.
So we treat, as a city, we have generally treated electronic cigarettes, vape products, the same as tobacco for the same reasons as tobacco, right? I mean, it's secondhand smoke, and you don't want to have exposure. We don't allow them around baseball fields, for example, and city parks, and that kind of thing for all the same reasons. And so there was, as city staff was reviewing the pedicab ordinance amendment, oftentimes we look at them more broadly. There's some issue is brought to us to consider, and we say, well, as long as we're working on this ordinance, let's think of other things that we might add to it. And so this is one of those. To be clear, the resident or the person who was interested in making the changes did not raise that, but that was at the staff level that we decided, like, you know what, we should probably address this too. We address, that with taxi cabs, and so we thought it would be appropriate just to make that change across the board.
I got a little bit of a follow-up question on that. I mean, so when talking about using an e-cigarette, and again, this is all curiosity. I mean, I'm not pressing. But, I mean, are we talking about, using on their shift? Are we talking about using while they're pedaling, which is clearly dangerous? Or, what's your thought there? Like, just for some clarity as to what we're doing here.
Sure. So the language says no driver shall smoke or use an electronic cigarette while transporting a passenger. So I think that may address your first question. Is it on their shift? Well, no, not if they can do it if they're not transporting a passenger. So it would only be when there's someone else who could be unintentionally sucking in the secondhand smoke, so to speak. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten the second part of your question.
I think you answered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
The second part was, are we talking about while they're riding the bike?
Oh.
Which is, you clearly answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So just another sort of clarification, Kelly, since this is fairly new to the area, and if they don't have any sort of signage, do people hail them like they hail a cab in the bigger cities, or how do they contact, just as they're riding by and people will say,
Yeah,
hey?
they can. There is like I said, they do have to have signage. They have to have a business name and a phone number on the sides of the pedicab. But yeah, I think a lot of them are just hailed as they're going by.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kelly? All right, anyone from the public like to address this topic? If so, please come forth at this time. There is a sign-in sheet at the table. Just for future reference, there are sign-in stickers on the back that people can place in a basket up here. Please state your name and city you're from.
Ben Snyder. I live in Cedar Rapids, but I own Pedal Power, a pedicab company. Sorry, I don't have my hearing aids in, so half of that was muffled. My fault for not wearing my hearing aids tonight. But I'm standing here just in case you have any questions or anything that I missed out on. But I would say that I'm licensed in Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Coralville, and Des Moines. And some of the variances in the ordinances vary a little bit. I would say there's some municipalities that probably could do more and some that could do less. And so I sent the council just some of my recommendations that could make it easier on the city, but some things that would make sense to separate us from traditional taxi cabs that are cars that have different capabilities or different sizes, or in one instance, like just the lettering size that a pedicab may not have room for compared to a traditional taxi cab, and other instances. So if you have any questions, let me know. But sorry, I missed out on half of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Anyone else like to address this topic? Seeing no one in person or online, council discussion.
I think it just makes sense to separate them out. I kind of see it like a bicycle versus a car, to have separate ordinances, and it just kind of makes sense to me, I think.
Roll call, please.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 10F, City Park Pool Professional Service Agreement. Resolution approving, authorizing, and directing the mayor to execute and the city clerk to attest an agreement by and between the City of Iowa City and Williams Associate Architects, Ltd. of Itasca, Illinois, to provide engineering consulting services for the City Park Pool Project. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Alter.
Second, Harmson.
All right, and welcome.
Hello. So my name is Brad Barker. I'm the Recreation Superintendent with the Parks and Recreation Department. And I'm here today to talk about this council action report before you, which would be the authorization to proceed forward with professional consulting services for City Park Pool. With City Park Pool having aged nearly 75 years, the current condition of the pool's infrastructure and equipment necessitates a direction on whether repair or replacement is needed in order to ensure a viable facility for the future of the community. To provide some context on a few of the issues currently experienced at the pool, one of the primary concerns there is the loss of water that we're experiencing. On average, we're losing 30,000 gallons of water per day. Every year, our staff takes measures to caulk the cracks and do basin painting and try to do what they can to hold off on all of that water being lost, but we still do lose an average of 30,000 gallons per day. And mind you, that is treated water, chemically treated water as well. So that is some that's a cost that we have for that water. The main pool gutter grading is worn and abrasive. Every year we get more complaints about people having minor scrapes and abrasions due to the gutters. And then the pool house structure and mechanical equipment is deficient and not constructed to meet modern employee safety and patron accommodation expectations. The bathhouse is just older, wasn't initially designed with that in mind. So with this project, we interviewed 4 consulting teams. They submitted their proposals, and we interviewed all 4 teams that submitted the proposals. And each firm had the opportunity to tour City Park Pool prior to filling for the season. So they were all able to go out there and see the pool in its dry state as they were coming in for their interviews. The 4 firms were narrowed down to 2 after the interviews, at which point some additional questions were asked of those 2 firms and clarification sought in order to fully assess each firm's sustainability or suitability for the project. Based on this process is the recommendation of city staff to proceed forward with Williams Architect Group for this project. They simply were the most qualified due to their comprehensive experience with aquatic projects and the strength and depth of their subconsultant team. They were able to detail similar repair projects to older pool shells and replacement projects where the new design was able to pay homage even to the past history of the pools that they were creating new. They have a solid understanding of the public input received to date, and they will bring the awareness into the project and by helping to ensure success through finding common ground with the community. The subconsultants for the project are, in addition to Williams Architect, is Councilman Hunziker Aquatic Design, Hitchcock Landscape Architects, IMEG Engineers, Barry Dunn Consulting, and the University of Illinois, should a statistically valid survey be needed in this project. I want to emphasize that this consultant agreement is a two-phased agreement where the findings of the first will determine the direction of the second phase. The scope of service for the first phase will begin with the facility condition assessment phase. This assessment will take into consideration patron safety, maintenance operations, ADA compliance, and life cycle assessments for the pool components, including cost estimates for repairs. All systems, including pool shell integrity, pool filtration, sanitation and circulation, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and architectural systems will be evaluated. The costs required to maintain or replace the system that fall short of administrative code, current industry standards, operational challenges, or exceed life expectancies will be reported. Some of the evaluation tasks that will require dry conditions, such as concrete core samples, were already completed prior to the season and will be assessed by the consultant. All in all, this first phase is a very data-driven, very data-heavy phase. Based on the findings of this phase one, the consultants will then recommend later this summer either repair or replacement, and will present the report of current conditions and analysis of viability to you all. City Council will then decide whether or not to proceed with this recommendation. So then the ball will be in your court to decide based on the guidance and the recommendations and the data that you receive on what the next step would be. If and only if Council decides to replace rather than repair, the project would move on to phase two as outlined. This would be the conceptual design phase, and a robust schedule of public input and a statistically valid survey are included in the contract in order to inform your decision-making process regarding the design of a new facility. The plan for public engagement is very similar to what was presented to the City Council in May during discussion of the RFQ that was to be advertised. However, an additional public input open house to be held at the beginning of the design phase has been added to this contract based on that guidance, should Council elect to replace the pool. The timeline for the first phase is investigate facility conditions in July, report of current condition and analysis of viability in August, and then the City Council presentation in September. And then if that decision is to move forward into phase two, the timeline for the second phase components would occur September through October of this year. Repair or replacement through the construction of a new facility will be targeted to occur after the 2024 season and is expected to require a full closure in 2025. Do you have any questions for me?
I guess I have a question for you, which mostly stems from the concerns of some of the members of the community that I've heard. And a repeated one is this concern with the same consultant addressing both phases and how there can be a perception, whether real or just in fact a perception, that a consultant would be incentivized to recommend a certain outcome for financial gain. I assume that you might be aware of those types of concerns. Would you be able to speak to your concern in that regard, your lack of concern in that regard, and where that comes from?
Sure. Yep. So just as a reminder, when the RFQ was put out, it was put out to have one consulting firm complete that project in phase one and phase two if necessary. So that is the way that it was advertised. I personally don't have any concerns about that. I think, especially given the scale of the project here, the first phase is about $11,000, $12,000, and then the second phase would be about $88,000. And there are one main consultant and 5 sub-consultants on this project, and so that would be divvied out amongst that. With that first phase being so data-driven and data-heavy, are your pipes leaking? Where are they leaking? How much water are you losing through them? Is your deck deteriorating? Where is it deteriorating? What's the age of your mechanical equipment? A lot of that is very matter of fact. And so I don't, especially given the professional standards of the engineering firms, and when they bid on these projects, the expectations that they are to uphold, I don't see any issues with that.
Just to follow up on that, and thank you for the answer. There was a suggestion that there would be an independent engineer apart from these consultant firms. Has that ship sailed? Is that something that is possible to maybe even have as an additional set of engineering data?
Sure. Yeah, that could be a possibility. In terms of costs for that project, I would imagine it would probably be similar to the phase 1 cost if you were to have 2 firms come in and kind of see how that data compares. So it would increase.
Double.
Yeah, it would increase the cost of the project, but I guess if you're looking for certainty on the data that you're seeing, if you have 2 firms that are reporting back similar results, or if they're way off, then that's a different matter, right?
Right.
But yeah, that could be a possibility.
Kind of in conjunction with Councilor Dunn's question, I mean, obviously there's no doubt that there is an issue. I mean, 30,000 gallons a day is a lot, so obviously there's an issue there. But you're saying that you don't see any issue with that you think that this company would play equal weight to repair versus replace, and would they be basing that on the cost of how each of those would pan out?
Right. So that would be the report that you would receive. So you would get the list of deficiencies and then the costs to bring that up to code and compliance. So you would really have that data to compare. So even if their recommendation was, let's build a new pool, let's say they were to say that, and that would be the recommendation to you, you also would have that data to show, well, here's the alternative if we were to repair the pool, here's what it would cost. And where does that get you in terms of what we currently have, kind of an upgraded version of that versus what a new pool might cost us? Yep. So you would receive all that information in that report. Our consultants would be presenting on their findings here to you, and then you would have that information to make your decision.
A really quick question. Can you remind us again of what the average lifespan of an outdoor pool is? Like a large Olympic size?
I don't have the specific numbers on that, but I would say probably 30 years.
Thanks.
Yep.
Hearing no more questions, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. So I know there are some folks that want to respond from the public. If I can get a show of hands in person and online who wants to speak to this agenda item. Okay.
4.
All right. I'm going to allow 3 minutes for comments. So I'll ask that you come up and give your name and the city you're from. Welcome.
Hey, Bruce. Jerry Prothero with Iowa City. You saw by the few hands that we're organizing ourselves a little bit better, so to use your time efficiently. So I'm representing City Park Pool, Back to the Future, as you might guess. We asked that if the members that came to please stand, just to show the representation. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. This is fantastic. You might be seeing some blue signs popping up around town, and those keep coming. We're on our 3rd order of those. But first, I wanted to start with some thank yous. I was sorry to see that Jeff and Julie aren't here. I wanted to thank them for meeting with us. Also, several council members have met with the group as well. Thank you for doing that. You know, we're learning how to engage with you, and it's been sort of a fun process, to be honest. We are learning. And I also want to say that we're feeling heard. I'm seeing wording that shows me that what we are saying is making its way into the contracts, and watch that time. I don't think I have to say this, but I'm going to briefly tell you what City Park Pool Back to the Future is about. So we looked at the current pool and what communities were being served by that pool. And our vision details, and the City Park Pool Back to the Future group agrees, that a new or renovated pool at City Park must, at a minimum, meet the user needs of communities currently served. And that's a pretty high bar. It's a pretty amazing pool that serves a lot of people, a lot of communities. I'm going to turn over the floor now and save a little time to one of our members, Rick, and he'll tell you his story.
Great. Thank you. And welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Please state your name and city you're from, and there's also a sign-in sheet there. And for anyone else that want to speak, there is a sticker in the back if you want to pre-fill that out. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. My name is Rick Spear from Iowa City. I'm here because I've been swimming laps at City Park probably since the 80s. But in addition to that, I'm now the father of 2 young swimmers who the youngest recently passed the deep end test. So I have 2 going off the diving board this year. And a lifetime ago, I started swimming for fitness after being employed by my local YMCA. And at that time, my duties included driving the bus, being a site coordinator for a day camp. And so I was the guy bringing busloads of kids to pools and beaches all over Polk County. And I developed a great appreciation for these spaces, for our community, for the young people and the people my age that they serve. And you know, what we're talking about is so many different community members who appreciate what this pool offers us. And I think this is more important now than ever, because we know in Iowa the water quality of our freshwater is not what it used to be. If I was driving that bus today, I don't know if I'd make the same stops. And so having a safe, clean place to swim and recreate and just be a community is more important than ever. We are advocating, you know, just for a continued role in the process, in having the opportunity to give community input. We have made some proposals about small group meetings being included with members of the consulting firms and the rec staff to just make sure that as broad a spectrum of the population that uses and appreciates and loves City Park Pool has a chance to be at tables, small tables, we hope, small tables, but that's why we're here. We love City Park Pool. We love being part of that community, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Got it.
Good evening. My name's Dan Katalinich, 418 Fifth Avenue. And, excuse me, first off, I'd like to say I appreciated and recognize the language that was in the agenda that referred to public engagement as part of the scope of service. So that is what our group is all about. And thanks, Jerry and Sue, for getting this going. CPP B2F is our group, and we're really focused on preserving the wonderful City Park pool. And I looked at Williams and Associates website and noted one of the projects I thought that was very similar to City Park pool. It was a facility that was built in the 60s in Morton Grove, Illinois, Oriole Park pool. And the phrase that caught my eye that they mentioned about that project was honor the legacy. And that's really what we're talking about with City Park Pool, is honoring that legacy. When Julie was hired, she was quoted in the Press Citizen in January 2016. She said, "Parks and recreation facilities and services are a real extension of what the community is all about," unquote. And I think what this community is preservation and recognizing our history, and we have an incredible aquatic legacy in this city. And I think our own Historic Preservation Commission really echoed what Williams and Associates had to say about honoring the legacy when they said City Park Pool is part of our shared heritage here in Iowa City, and that we should pursue updates and repairs, not an entirely new design. And we talked about, you all talked about repairing and replacing, but that does not exclude honoring the legacy and recognizing that the design of City Park Pool, I call it the big water in the Oak Savannah, and I think that is the critical element that we're talking about. The facility has served people very well, and we do not need to change that design. It's an incredible and iconic part of Iowa City, and we look forward to engaging in this process with council and with Williams and Associates to honor the legacy that was established with the original design of City Park Pool, and serving our citizens far into the future with that beautiful design that was created 75 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Saved by the bell. No. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Dennis Beffler, and I've lived in Iowa City for 16 years, and I'm an avid swimmer. I see a lot of my friends here, so it's like the morning crowd at the pool. I just want to say a couple things about how awesome our pool is. One thing is great. We have 20 to 30 swimmers most mornings, most days at lunch. If you don't believe me, come by sometime and check it out. I would actually really appreciate if members of this group would come and see how the pool is used. Some of the proposals I've seen, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare any remarks, so I'm going to just ramble. Some of the ideas that I've heard presented don't have as many lap lanes, and so that's just one thing I'm really going to be pushing for is, hey, the pool gets used a lot. We need space to swim. I love the opening remarks about the value of Parks and Rec and how we're honoring Parks and Rec Month, and I just thought it was so perfect. Like, we need to be outside. We need a clean place to swim. I recently injured myself, and swimming was like my huge rehab, and I need vitamin D so that I can heal my bones. And being outside and swimming, since I can't run anymore, has been just a huge help. I would also say that if we're going to be able to repair this pool, which I believe is possible, we wouldn't have to lose it for a season. I think if we're creative with the way that we bid the work in the off-season, things can be repaired. We can look at doing a second building to replace the older building. Just like Kinnick Stadium, we built a north end zone in the off-season. We could do the same thing with the park pool there. We could make it a priority, make sure that the work gets done during the winter months when we can't be swimming outside, and creatively maintain that pool so we don't have to not use it for a season. Like I said, I didn't prepare anything, so thank you for your time. Really
Thank
appreciate
you. Anyone else like to address this topic? Seeing no one in person or online, council discussion.
I appreciated hearing the phrase honor the legacy, and hearing that that came from this company. I would hope that they would see that with our city park pool too, that it truly is a legacy. It's like somebody asked about the lifespan of a pool. It's been here a long time, and it does have a lot of history, and Iowa City's full of history, and I believe we need to honor that, and I would hope that this company truly does believe that about honoring the legacy.
One of the things, just following on the heels of that, is that, I think of these consultants. I mean, this is their professional reputation on the line, right? And so I think that one of the things that reassures me is that something that has other projects similar that they're touting on their website and that they are engaged in nationally, I think should give us all a great deal of confidence. I know that there's been concern about the two phases, and depending on what the data-driven phase is, that will drive then the other. And I know that there's the temptation. In fact, I was like, okay, I'm going to think this through, and to say, sure, maybe there's going to be wanting to put a thumb on that thing a little bit to drive. When I stop and back up a little bit, I just think this is a national company's reputation on the line, and their names would be mud if they did that. So I sort of thought this through, and I was like, that's not how good companies operate, right? So, do I know them personally? No. And frankly, I think that's a good thing, right? But I just wanted to raise that because I think that this has been a really fraught process up till now, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you who are in the room, and then also I know your numbers are even more than this, and that you are merely representatives, for continuing to be part of the process. It's been messy, it's been painful at times, but I appreciate you continuing to reach out. I've had some really good conversations, and those are not one and done. But I just wanted to sort of put this out there that, I think that as we move forward with the consultants, I think we can rest assured that their professional reputations are at stake about the kind of investigation that they do, and therefore then whatever they find, right? That they're not predetermining what the second phase should be. This would really be bad for their reputations. So I just wanted to put that out there. I was sort of, for anybody who's had coffee with me, I process out loud. So this was a little bit of that, right? But I just wanted to share it in case there are people who that would be helpful to hear as well. The other thing, too, is just I also was incredibly pleased to see that, in fact, the kind of language that your group is part of your mission statement about making it as available and accommodating as it is now, plus more, that it's going to exist for all users and to expand them for current use. And I think that that's a really interesting and good way to think about this. It's a conceptual framework for what our consultants can do. So I just want to say thank you for you being so thoughtful about saying there's all these different inputs. How can we get our vision and our desires out there while also being inclusive of many other people who maybe aren't using the pool yet? So anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for that. And I think that this is a really good step forward.
I just want to take a second to address a couple things regarding the pool issue more broadly, and especially regarding the comments today. One of the emails that I received in the past was that the group is trying not to be adversarial and not to speak at so many council meetings that we shudder when we see your faces in the audience. I really want to communicate, and I think that I can speak on behalf of the entire council, but I will not do so in this moment, that will never happen. democracy, everyone up here understands, is a very messy thing. It takes time for people to figure out as you guys have developed your strategies for communication with us. But I really want it to be understood that, we are not your adversaries in this decision-making process, and that, certainly myself, I very much appreciate the advocacy that you have among other people in the community have brought to this council. So I want to thank you for that on my own behalf. In addition to that, just kind of speaking to a few of the comments, I wrote down 4 main points. Honoring the legacy. This one line I just really liked: big water in the Oaks Savannah, and we want to be at the table as well as we need to meet current needs. I really don't find any of that stuff disagreeable. So just sharing that to this point. Again, saying that I continue to appreciate your advocacy, whether it's early advocacy or not, it's all going to be messy all the time. So thank you for being here and being willing to wade through whatever that is with us. So thank you.
Well, I too want to thank everyone for coming and speaking. One thought that I had with regard to the big water in the Oaks Savannah, which I think is an interesting way of thinking about City Park Pool. There's also a concept called forest bathing. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, of going to experience the health benefits of simply bathing in the forests. And I think City Park Pool, in a way, is an interesting expression of that idea. We're actually in the water, not walking through Hickory Hill Park necessarily, but it's forest bathing nevertheless. There are a couple of things regarding the contract that I do want to talk about, and I am happy that there now have been included some open house opportunities with the conceptual design phase, which consist of, in describing the proposal, a community expo type experience where participants move from station to station to inform their responses on an overall feedback worksheet. I would like to suggest that we could amend the language here. What I would really like to see, and it's in part based on my own experience working on projects like this, is that after the expo type experience, we would have basically a community comment period where people would have an opportunity to speak and be heard as well as listen to the comments and concerns of those in attendance. So everyone at that meeting would have an opportunity to hear the various perspectives that might come from such a process. I'm a huge fan of Jane Jacobs, the famous city activist urban planner from New York City, who said that cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. I really feel that should be the way we approach this project, that everyone be heard by everyone else so that we have a better understanding of where we're all coming from. I'm concerned that with the focus groups, which are more kind of internally oriented, we need some balance there. We need for people to not only sort of, join together with their like-minded folks, but also hear what other perspectives are in an in-person format. So that would be one suggestion I would make to amend the contract, would be to add that language that, after the expo type experience, a community comment period shall be held for all in attendance. The community comment period would be presided over by a professional facilitator who would summarize the public comments. So that's one thing. And then the second does have to do with the facility condition assessment phase. I feel it would be prudent for a couple of reasons to consider having that work done by an independent engineer. One, it would, I think, address any lingering concerns we have about the influence that working on both the facility assessment and the design phase, could take place if they were all under the same contract. The second is that it would be an independent engineer, someone who would be new to the project. Some of the members of that consultant team were involved in the earlier phase study as well. So this would bring a new perspective from an independent source doing that facility condition assessment. So I would ask you to consider the two changes. One, adding the community comment period as I was describing, and then secondly, that we delete from the scope of services the facility condition assessment phase and give that to an independent source.
I think speaking to the first proposal to, as I understand, amend the contract to add a deliberate, basically public forum. I think that's a good idea. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do that or wouldn't want to do that. I think it just makes sense, but rather than just having people come to a room and look at stuff, we should probably get their feedback in a well-documented, concise way and allow them to share it openly and honestly, and also hear the feedback of other people. I think that that's also something that's valuable that you don't get to really see if people are just filling out a survey. Like, oh, what do other people think? Oh, I'm concerned about that too. I didn't think about that. I think there's value there.
I'm not doubting that there's value, but I think we're wanting the data first. Mm-hmm. And then once we, hear both what the cost is based on the data to repair the current, or, now we're going to move towards replacement. I think that's where we get that information. One, I want to say, happy to know that we're at this part where we're going to be looking at, do we replace or do we, kind of repair, what we currently have. And so I feel it's the next appropriate step. I want to thank everybody for coming out. We heard you loud and clear. And I appreciated the love and the expressions of hope that you all have for, one, your city, but also for this park and for swimming. I personally am not a confident swimmer. I can get to the edge if it's not wide water. And I was in the water yesterday. I'm a life jacket type deep water swimmer. And so one thing I will say as we're moving into who will experience this pool, I understand the need for some things such as laps and all that other stuff. But this is our only pool that is outside in our community. And when I think of some of the communities that are there, certainly want to make sure that they feel welcomed and can come into whatever is developed. But how I would dare us to dream a little bit of how we can get other communities, people that aren't confident with water, but it's the summer when that's open. How can we get them engaged and interested to coming to something? And so I would just encourage us not to be fully in. I would encourage us to dream a little bit and to figure out how can we make sure that there are other people that aren't swimmers, aren't confident swimmers, to come and experience life changing opportunities just with the physical exercise. And so I would encourage us just to make sure that as we're moving forward, to dream a little bit as well. I appreciate all the words that were said today. And I'm going to support this as it is. I do understand. I will tell you that the comments that were made about, concerns about, the current people being not persuaded, if they're the same ones that is doing phase 1 and phase 2. I get that. I hear it. It can be a real thing. I'm going to put my trust and hope in that this community words have been loud and clear on what they're hoping for, which is really someone to come in and looking at this without their own agenda and giving us an honest opinion on what they see. And so that's what I'm going to put my hope and trust in. And I know as a community, we will hear more of what the needs are, and we'll move forward. We're going to move forward in unity. So thank you all for being here today.
I also want to thank everyone for continuing to stick with the process. I know that the engagement has been messy and difficult, but I agree with Councilor Dunn that it is what we signed up for. And, it is nice when we can kind of turn that corner and get to that point of like, okay, we do feel heard and know that, nobody knows how this works. I say that all the time. Nobody knows how this works, and it feels like we should be able to lead something that's not quite as painful. So thank you for sticking with it. I also want to just address the comments about the proposed changes to the contract. I think, and I just want staff to kind of check me on this, but this contract, the whole scope is under $100,000. This is really the, if we move past phase 1 of this contract into phase 2 of this contract, it is not the complete design from which the pool will be built. And so that will be an additional RFP process and will be a much larger scope in terms of the financial investment of the city, and we'll really get into the details. So I feel confident that what's proposed here as far as the level of engagement makes sense for the scope that we're doing. And if we move to phase 2 of this contract, we know that after that will be much larger. I guess that's true even if we just go with the repair. There'll be a much larger actual schematics and architectural design and that kind of thing. So just to make sure everyone understands that will be continued process after that point. And then also, I think something that probably all of you have learned during this process is that you can continue to provide input and comment, and whether that's one-on-one or in these meetings or via email, letter, text, anything, and that all counts. And so even if a particular phase of the very structured public engagement, if that doesn't seem satisfactory to you, then keep pushing, keep reaching out. I think we can really, that is something that the community builds, the community provides. So don't be put off if a particular event or way in which feedback is collected, if that doesn't feel like enough. I think now you all have a really good template for continuing to engage and to provide that input. So I'm comfortable with this as it is. And I think, I also know that our city attorneys have reviewed this contract, and I guess I'll just put you on the spot, Eric. Any concerns with a conflict of interest relating to the phase 1 and phase 2?
Well, I guess I'm less qualified to address that. I think, comments have been made about professionalism and so forth, and reputation to a consultant who is seen to be putting their thumbs on the scale later, and I think that carries a lot of weight in the field. Also, as has been mentioned, this will be coming back to you, to council, at a public meeting where others can comment after phase 1. And so if there's any appearance that the data has I think the data is largely objective. There is, of course, a recommendation at the end by the consultant to say, based on this data, which I'm showing you, and this data, which I'm showing you, renovate and repair, my professional recommendation is to do one of those two. And then proceed to phase B of the scope of services of the contract. Again, all in full public view. There is one clarification I want to make, and that's in the consultant agreement in one of the whereas clauses. It indicates that the city intends to amend the agreement to include design, bidding, and construction phase services once the final scope of the project has been determined. Now, again, that's something that would have to be done, but the resolution empowers the city manager to amend the contract as needed. So I do want to be completely transparent about that part of it. There will be additional steps in public input, of course, as we go through the way, but it's not crystal clear to me based on this contract that it'll be a brand new RFP or something like that when we get to the design phase. whether that's renovation or replacement.
Thank you for that. Okay.
All right. I think we're ready for.
I was just going to, not a ton else to add, other than just to also add my gratitude to all of the community members who have been wanting to share their voices and their perspectives on this. At the end of the day, we'll end up with, I think we all want to end up with a really good city park pool that will last for years and years to come, whatever repair or replace that looks like. I think that's a shared goal that we all have, and then just working out these details in a process like this with multiple, almost a shotgun approach to getting that input, if it requires to move to phase 2, I think is something that I was actually really happy to see the combination of open house, focus group meetings, surveys, and then of course the public meetings in which, as you all are now very familiar and comfortable with, you can give us that feedback that we need to hear up here on council. So also supporting it for those reasons.
Great. Well, we're going to take roll call here in a second, but I want to say thanks to everyone that came. Even if you didn't speak, we saw you represented, so thanks again. Roll call, please.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. And thanks again. All right. We're going to move on to items 11A.
Mayor, could we get a motion to accept correspondence?
Absolutely. Could I get a motion to accept correspondence?
So moved. Alter.
Second done.
Oh, go ahead.
Moved by Alter, seconded by Dunn, because he was a little more louder.
Yeah.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. (11A) Announcement of vacancies new. Planning and Zoning Commission, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment through July 30th, 2026. Parks and Recreation Commission, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment through December 31st, 2023. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. Can I get a motion to accept correspondence?
So moved. Done.
Second, Burgess.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Now announcements of vacancies previous. 12A is Ad Hoc Truth and Reconciliation Commission, 2 vacancies to fill an unexpired term upon appointment through December 31st, 2024. Human Rights Commission, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. Monday, July 3rd, 2023. Historic Preservation Commission, East College Street, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Historic Preservation Commission, Jefferson Street, 1 vacancy to fill a 3-year term. Historic Preservation Commission, North Side, 1 vacancy to fill a 3-year term. Historic Preservation Commission, Woodlawn Avenue, 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Vacancies will remain open until filled. And now we're at item number 13, City Council information.
Probably everyone will say, what a great weekend.
Yes.
Last weekend. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes.
I'll just mention, because we won't be meeting next till July 11th. The weekend just prior to that, I think it's the 8th and the 9th, I submitted for the Open Gardens Tour, which is sponsored by Project Green, North Market Square Park, which is our park in the north side. So it will be, public park on the Open Gardens Tour. So I'll be there from 4 to 8 p.m. on Saturday and 10 to 2 p.m. on Sunday. So drop by, say hello. Those are really fun events. It's kind of, hopefully the weather will be nice. As I was saying to Sean before the meeting, it's kind of nice that it's not the middle of the day, because you can get hammered weather-wise in the mid-afternoon sun. So early in the morning and later in the evening. Come on by.
I was trying to find the diversity market dates, but I know we're going to be.
It is that.
Starts on the 8th.
Yeah, it starts on
July 8th. Yeah.
Yes, and we're going to have 6 weeks.
That sounds right.
Yeah, going to be 6 weeks. So that's going to be coming up this weekend. Is going to be the downtown, Iowa City downtown block party. It would encourage people to come out to that. It's Saturday starting at 5 p.m., I believe. So lots of fun this weekend. Was awesome and amazing. Of course, our city celebrates Juneteenth, and it's also a federal holiday. So there are lots of events surrounding that, and Pride was off the chains once again this year. So that was really good. And a reminder that we're not going to be meeting the first Tuesday of next month, but we're going to meet the second Tuesday on July 11th. And that'll be the only meeting that we'll have for council meeting in July. All right, we'll move on to items number 14, and we'll get reports from our city manager's office.
Mayor, I'd like to take a moment just to kind of catch the council up on some of our activities with our underestimated and entrepreneur support grant program. So as you may know already, and maybe the public hasn't heard, but we've had 31 applicants that put in requests for a total of $25 million. And so we have $4 million to work with, so our task is a little daunting. So our committee's been meeting diligently. We have actually focused on the physical space requests first, understanding that those are likely going to be the ones that need more resources. So we wanted to kind of get those out of the way to begin with. We noticed there's a lot of similarities in many of the applicants that we received. Some of the high-ranking, more common themes were in business and life coaching. The next highest one was incubators and accelerators, and not surprising, also was community kitchen. We had several there, as well as education workshops, and there were some others in there, but those were the ones that ranked up really high. And so we sat down and looked at and visited with 8 different proposals, and I think our next steps is going to bring them together and have a roundtable with the idea of focusing on the potential for feasible partnerships, and see if those things can come together into some type of a joint process that we could then get behind and bring before council. And so we'll probably wind up doing the same thing for the business support activities, and there's also several similar themes in the business support activities as well that will probably mimic some of the very same steps that we've done initially. So just wanted to kind of share that with you. I know that's been out there a little bit, and just wanted to let you know that there's been some diligent work going on in that effort and trying to kind of get this down so that we can have something for you in the next several weeks, so I would imagine.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Great. Our city attorney's office.
Nothing for me tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. City clerk's office.
I just wanted to say thank you to our cable division. If you haven't noticed the new projector, and you can actually see it with the lights on, and should be a much better picture on our live stream.
Great.
Too, so.
Great. Awesome. We're at item number 15. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Burgess, seconded by Harmson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
You're watching City Channel 4.
People can park on it.
You know, there may be debris on it.